Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is Todd Lippy, editor of the Esopus Reader, a hardback anthology of fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and interviews. All of the book's contents originally appeared in Esopus, the nonprofit's art publication that Todd founded and edited from 2003 to 2018. Todd, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Well, if someone hasn't yet heard about the anthology, the Esopus Reader yet, can you talk about the anthology and the stories and interviews that it contains?
Sure. Basically, Esopus magazine ran from, as you said, 2003 to 2018, and every issue featured quite a range of content, from artist projects to visual essays to archival reproductions to fiction and nonfiction and other kinds of writing. A lot of the writing, some people felt was sometimes overshadowed by the kind of dynamic visual presentation to things in the magazine. And I always felt like it would be nice to just devote an entire volume just to the writing without any other distractions. And the fact that many of those issues are now sold out made it seem like an even better idea. So the contents of the book range from fiction. I'm really proud. We did a series called New Voices, which featured debuts of never before published fiction writers, and a whole bunch of them. We have all 11 in the book, and more than half ended up with pretty serious book deals and novels and short story collections and publishing many other places besides. So that's kind of an exciting legacy for the magazine. And then there's interviews. There are a series of essays written by creative practitioners ranging from composers to chefs to lighting designers to game designers to architects. Basically, I would ask each of them to write kind of a personal take on their process. You know, what it was like to choreograph dances to Ligeti, the composer, or what it was like to learn how to cook it in Italian kind of cuisine by moving to Italy. And they kind of make up the other larger bulk of contents in the issue. And then there's poetry. There's some nonfiction essays more related to oddball subject matter, like the history of ice cream truck music, or the influence of Ouija boards on creativity, or Nostradamus's changing image over the course of 500 years. That's a quick survey for you.
Sure. Well, what led you to start the magazine and keep it running for 15 years?
Well, I had been in magazine publishing for a while, and I was always a little disappointed and a little disaffected by the influence of advertising, particularly on content in magazine publications. And I always felt like various different kinds of creative disciplines were pretty siloed in the magazine world. So you would always have you go to like a newsstand, you would see the literary section, then you would see the music section, and then you would see the design section. And I like the idea of bringing everything together into one space and one publication without any kind of advertising, no commercial influence whatsoever, which is why we're a nonprofit. So we could do this through grants and personal donations. And I really wanted to make it affordable. So the early issues were $10 each, and they're very high quality printing. Most of the issues had pulled out posters. Each issue had a CD of new music commissioned by musicians based on a particular theme. So the idea was to kind of create a limited edition artwork featuring a whole wide range of disciplines that everybody could have access to.
So what were the challenges and the things that you enjoyed about editing and publishing Esopus magazine for 15 years?
The challenges were just money. You know, it's always difficult in any aspect of publishing. It's always hard, especially now, to publish a print magazine or book or anything that's related to this more analog presentation of material. But when you're a nonprofit, it makes it easier somewhat in that you can apply for grants if you have this 501c3 designation from the IRS. which means anybody who gives you money will get a deduction on their income tax that next year. It also means larger public agencies like the National Endowment for the Arts, or in New York, NISCA, or the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs can give you money. And we got quite a bit of money from them and from foundations like the Warhol Foundation and many others. But it was always a struggle. It was always tough to get that next round of grants. There's a lot of applications you fill out that you end up getting no's on. That was really the only major challenge. I'd say the other kind of significant issue was just finding a niche for the publication, because it didn't really fit into any comfortable categories. It wasn't as I said earlier, it wasn't a literary magazine necessarily. It wasn't an art magazine necessarily. So kind of via distribution, finding places on newsstands for it where it wouldn't get lost in the shuffle was a little challenging. But, the challenges were far outweighed by the joys of, number one, being able to work with an incredible range of people well known, from artists like Jenny Holzer and Carrie James Marshall to writers like Karl Ove Knausgaard and Francine Prose and again, Jim Shepard and a ton of other amazing people. And then getting it into the hands of people who might not know about this work was super exciting and always a thrill.
Well, I'm curious, do you have a favorite story or interview from the anthology?
Oh my God, that's a tough one. There's the piece that ends the issue was the first piece I commissioned. And I like to find younger writers, just like with the fiction stuff, who hadn't done a lot of publications or maybe hadn't published anything. And this writer's name was, at the time, Heather Larson. She's now Heather McPherson. She married another contributor to Esopus after this was published. But I commissioned her in 2003 to go down to Jessica Lynch, the soldier who you may remember was captured in Iraq and then rescued, turned into a huge media frenzy. And I wanted, since the magazine was so much about this kind of oversized influence of commercialism on content, I thought it would be interesting to have her go down and kind of suss out, what reporters had come down, how they were interacting with the locals, et cetera. And she ended up writing this really wonderful long form essay called Nothing Personal, which, there's so many things, so many pieces I love, but I guess maybe because this was the first result of a commission, and it was so good that I kind of have a soft spot in my heart for that. There's a wonderful interview with Lisa Kudrow and Michael Patrick King about their conception of and execution of The Comeback, that wonderful HBO series that at that point it only run for one season and didn't look like it was going to run for another. And again, I could go on and on and on.
Sure.
Yeah, it's all good. I'm anything in here, it's in here because I love it, and I think it's worth other people getting a chance to read and see.
At Kroger, we believe fresh means holding our produce to a higher standard. That's why we do up to a 27-point inspection on our produce. Like for citrus, we check for things like scarring and sunburn. Yep, oranges can sunburn, and we'll make sure you never see it. In fact, we only allow the best oranges, lemons, and grapefruits to reach our shelves. Because when it comes to fresh for everyone, we believe the juice is worth the squeeze. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Sure. Well, in addition to putting together this anthology, which was drawn from the many years of publication of the magazine, I'm curious, what are you doing now? Are you still in magazine publishing?
I'm still, the Esopus Foundation is still a running concern, and we'll probably do another. And we've stopped publishing the magazine, but I don't know if you're aware, last year we published a book called Modern Artifacts, which was a collection of all 18 installments of a series, the same name, that we did with MoMA, where we would ask the archivist at MoMA, Michelle Ellegat, to basically introduce a particular component of the archives in each issue of Esopus. So we did things like documents related to the first Matisse one-person show in New York, or an exhibition that was never actually mounted called Exhibition X in 1942 that was meant to get a kind of sleepy populace behind the idea of taking on Germany and being less isolationist in World War II. So that was certainly that was a lot of fun to do,
Sure.
and it turned out to be quite a success, which was nice. And we'll probably do another series of excerpts from a series called Guarded Opinions, which didn't quite make sense in this book in the anthology for a lot of reasons that a lot of other things didn't make sense, and that all these essays were kind of tied pretty closely to artworks. We'd ask museum guards to write about an artwork that they oversaw. So we got some really amazing reflections by people who spend more time with artwork, particular artwork anyway, than maybe even the artist spent. And there are about, I think, 12 of those, and they would really make for a nice little book. So that's probably next. And then with the foundation, I'm very involved in trying to get back issues that we have left into libraries, public libraries, that we're donating copies. And that's been kind of rough over the past couple of years. We also had a education initiative we were hoping to do. We had a bunch of events planned, which obviously have all been canceled. So hopefully we'll gear back up with all of that stuff as things, knock on wood, start to come back to some degree of normalcy, although who knows these days.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, basically.
I think if the New York City mayor has anything to say about it, is that he's ready for everybody to come back to the office.
I know. And of course, I was reading this morning about some other new variant that's rearing ugly head somewhere. It's oh my god. Anyway, digressing. Essentially, yeah, the Esopus Foundation is still quite vital, and I'm its executive director and also the editor of Esopus and all the books. So I'm basically the only full-time employee. So, and then I do other things as well. I'm a musician, and I also do a fair amount of freelance design work. So I'm busy.
Gotcha.
Got a lot of good stuff.
Well, when you were editing Esopus, the magazine, did you primarily approach authors about contributing, or did you ever have open calls for manuscripts?
Well, yes. So that's a great question, and I always love answering it because it's multi-part answer. But for all the fiction, that was all unsolicited submissions. We did have people on our advisory board like Jim Shepard, who, an amazing author who teaches at Williams and would send along when he felt like he had a particularly promising student. He would send along a manuscript or put them in touch with me. But the bulk of those stories were all just things I found in the pile of submissions I would get.
Wow.
And there were a lot of fine submissions. There were some not so great submissions. And then every once in a while, you from the first paragraph, you would just say, wow. And because you're really explicitly asking only for unpublished authors, it's a much more of a mixed bag as far as submissions. But when you get something good, it's a super exciting experience, to be able to be involved in that debut of that writer's work.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Then with better known people or artists that I approached, I would approach them directly. I have like a wish list of people, like Knausgaard was someone I was really basically stalking for a couple of years before he agreed to do something. But the complicating factor in all this was that I made a statement in the editor's note in the first issue of Esopus, and I really stuck to it. And that was, I'm not going to ever try to reach someone through their handler. So I would never reach out to, let's say, an author via his or her agent, or a publicist, or an artist through their gallery, or their manager. So it was part of this whole desire to avoid this filtration of content, and having worked for a film magazine before that, and having to deal with Asians who often never got the message to their clients, who I would then see later at a event, and they would say, I never heard anything about this. I wish I'd known. I would have done it. I just thought, I'm not even gonna try to do it that way. I'm just gonna struggle to find, the person somehow by email or via, I've been around for a while. So, friends of friends of friends, it's a fairly large circle, and you can usually get to somebody if you really push. So that was great because it's only me basically doing the magazine. It not only meant I would contact them initially, but I would work directly with each contributor, whether it was a fiction writer, whether it was a nonfiction essayist, whether it was an interview. It was just me and them. So there was very little noise between that relationship and when the issue ended up on press. So, and that I think is kind of the legacy of the book as well, and that it's all really a series of personal relationships that resulted in these wonderful contributions.
That's great. Well, what novels or anthologies have you read recently that you enjoyed?
Oh my gosh. Let's see. What's the last thing I read that I really, really loved? Oh my God. When am I? Can you edit this out while I go through my list?
Yep.
Oh my God, this is terrible. I literally have read like 6 things. Well, I read the latest Knausgaard, which I thought was fantastic. I read Our Country Friends, the Steingart, which I thought was amazing and just a wonderful read and so timely right now. What else? I have to look at my list.
Sure.
Let's see. What else? I got to look at my bookshelves. I haven't read a lot. Honestly, I haven't read a lot of anthologies recently. I have, there are a lot of colleagues like Cabinet Magazine did an anthology a while back, which was incredible. Baum has done some wonderful anthologies. These were all people I worked with at the time. But I often read, I read pretty much cover to cover the New Yorker every week. That's where I get a lot of my short fiction injections. Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of blanking. I apologize.
That's okay.
You cobbled something together from that?
Yeah, I can. All
right.
Well,
Cool.
Where can people find Esopus online?
It's just literally Esopus, ESOPUS.org. And that's where you can also learn more about the book. We have a online store. So it's, sorry to be commercialized about it, but if someone wants to purchase one, they can do it there, or they can find it hopefully at their local independent bookstore. We're pretty well distributed. And the book comes out. Well, I shouldn't say that because obviously this is going to come out later than when the book comes out anyway. So.
Yeah. Great. Well, again, we've been speaking with Todd Lippy, editor of the Esopus Reader, a hardback anthology of fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and interviews. The anthology is on sale now, so go buy a copy. And Todd, thanks for doing this interview.
I'm so pleased to be able to do it. It was a super fun time. Thank you, Jeff.
Great.